Hello and welcome back to Clockwork and Noodles, the channel where we discuss anime, talk about random things, and I ramble on about Noodles and how much I adore certain series and characters. Before I go into today's episode, I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for being with me and being great and so nice to talk to for this season. I did make a very big decision to air on this season because of how much I fell in love with it after binge watching. I admit I'm not the best person to often talk about something like this, or I've not had too long with the material in front of me, but I fell in love, guys. I fell in love with Golden Kamuy. After binge watching it and then watching this season, it made its way up into my top 10 anime of all time. I'm so thankful that you guys have been so nice with me. It's been great to talk to some of you guys, so I really, really do appreciate you guys tuning in. First things first, guys, my Winter 2021 video is now up on the channel for you guys to see what anime I will be airing next season. What anime have I decided to release YouTube videos on? So what will I be breaking apart, digging my teeth into? I really hope that I get to see some of you guys again. Also attached to that video is my top 3 anime of fall 2020. You get to see what made the top 3. What did I crown king and best anime of the season? Although I won't lie, after seeing this episode, I may regret my choice a little bit. Let's just say that. Also have a Discord channel, so the link is on the screen. You will get a notification whenever a video goes up on my channel. It also is a great place for you to learn if there is a delay on a video, if something is going to go up a little bit late. And as the channel starts to grow, I will be expanding from that platform. Right, today's episode 11 of the Golden Kamuy Season 3, Sin and Impurity. Wow, this is the penultimate episode. I did wonder if they would be able to top the amazing cliffhanger of last season. Yes, 100%. Hand on heart, I believe that today's episode 11, Season 3, Episode 35 of Golden Kamuy, is the best episode of all 3 seasons. Allow me, guys, to be a little bit bold and say this is the best episode of this entire full anime 2020 season. This episode is a culmination of 3 seasons of hard work, 3 seasons of really in-depth, amazingly built storylines, amazingly developed characters. This episode, even with our twists and our turns and our characters finally showing their true colours, even though we already knew their true colours, this episode was just intriguing. I also found it quite hard to watch it in a go. I had to take little breaks because obviously I'm writing notes, having to take it all in. And I was crying at one point. There was a bit which got me really badly, so I had to stop and cry. So this is probably going up a couple of hours later than it would, just because I want to do this anime justice. And I really can't exaggerate how much I think this is the best anime episode. I love this episode, the way it's all done. The entire episode is slotted together to build tension, and it just builds and builds until the anxiety, the tension, the atmosphere, it all just comes together to make this what it is. We open back with our heartfelt reunion where we see Sugimoto finally joining up with Shiraishi. These two, I love these two. I've mentioned before, these guys have a beautiful, genuine chemistry between them. They are hilarious together. I really miss seeing these two together. Shiraishi has grown on me, and seeing him try his best to be funny around the group with Kiro and with Ogata and Asirpa, I really just appreciate how he's tried, but it's just not the same as seeing him with Sugimoto. Nobody does glomps anymore. I don't know why people don't do glomps, but the Sugimoto Shiraishi glomp and the snot on the face, it's welcome. This is Golden Kamuy. That's what Golden Kamuy is all about. It's just that these heartfelt moments and then the comedy being nicely tucked into it. We get a nice reveal for Shiraishi. Shiraishi learns what we, the audience, already knows, is the fact that it was indeed Ogata who shot him and Wilk. The guys now are on a mission to retrieve Asirpa before it's too late. We transition back to our enlightened Asirpa, who is now full on in the clutches of danger. The wolf, the different type of wolf, has now got his eye on her. We do find something quite interesting that Asirpa tried to forget about the moment with learning his name, because that is also when Wilk and Retar left. So she made a big effort to forget about that moment. The one moment that Wilk actually wanted to be unforgettable, she forgot about it because she associated it with something with losing the 2 things that really mattered to her. It does raise a few little questions. Did she need to forget? Did he do that on purpose, that she needed to forget that moment until it was necessary for her to know? So was her meet up with Kiro all planned for him to be the one to re-jog her memory? So a few little interesting little questions there. Let's just go into it. Let's start talking about Asirpa and Ogata. The hint that everything was going to go down this episode. We get Kiro and Sophia, who are looking out into the distance, not even noticing that Asirpa is shedding tears. But Ogata is. Ogata is wearing the face of evil. This is the episode. Obviously, up until this point, I've been quite soft on Ogata. Full understanding that people do not like the character for Ogata at all. He's a very difficult character to even back up, but he is interesting. He is the one who notices the crying. This immediate act of him lying to Kiro is where the betrayal starts to happen. I've always been very curious about the relationship between Kiro and Ogata. He tells them that nothing is wrong, where he ends up distracting them to get them to go and make a shelter. This is where we start to separate. Ogata separates by getting Asirpa to go with him to get some firewood. Sophia, this episode doesn't really have much of a role, so we don't really get to talk about her, so that's good. We are going to try focusing in, just to make this a little bit speedier, on the characters who really matter. So I will be trying to summarise as best as I can, just because there's a lot going on. That face, just that Ogata face, hopefully reminding us if we've all been fooled by the new leaf and the cute moments where he's tried to blend into his group. We're now reminded of the man that Ogata really is. And he just comes out, he doesn't waste any time, and he just comes out and he says it. You have remembered something important. It's the key to the code. We see Ogata this episode trying many different ways of getting the same goal. He needs that code. Once he has that code, he can go ahead alone to find the gold. The idea is he doesn't actually need Kiro, he doesn't need Asirpa. Asirpa right now is only alive because she has the information he needs, which now is where we have to realise that her life is in danger. He starts with quite a blunt method where he just wants to write a deal. He says that I don't want all the gold, I just want a reward for fighting and putting my life on the line, where he just asks just for enough, just not to start a war. Tell me how to break the code and you can be free of all the killings. You can go home and you can live free. So his first method, we're going to see some different methods from this guy to show you the levels of desperation, how far this man will go to get what he wants. He starts off by trying to be quite fair, like, I'll free you, I'm going to free you from the killings, you don't have to be part of this, you don't want to kill people. Where we then cut back to a nice little scene with the rest of Team Sugimoto who find Svetlana. Tsukizuma is going to get some really nice points this episode because it's actually Tsukizuma who stops. So Koito and Tanigaki go straight on ahead. I have so much respect for Tsukizuma because he knows that there's no time. There is no time to stop. They can't afford to be stopping for her. But he does make the effort and he stops regardless. That it really does show a nice caring side to Tsukizuma. And he never really was a favourite character of mine, but this episode, I feel like he's definitely risen in the ranks of my favourites. I really am growing to love this guy talking in Russian. I actually adore hearing him talking in Russian. He does mention her name and he mentions the fact that the parents saved him. But that is when we find out the reason why Svetlana ran in the first place. Svetlana was bored of her life and she followed happily, willingly because she wanted to see the city. Tsukizuma offers her way home. He even tells her the sleds are over there, which is nice. So he hasn't given up. Also hoping that's because he saw how much that Sugimoto wanted to find her in the first place, and maybe that's rubbed off a little bit on him. She doesn't want to go back, and he gets a little bit worked up, a little emotional, because we know of his backstory, we've had some of his information given, and we can see, with all those stories coming together, why he's acting the way he is, where he even says, do you know how they feel when they're waiting for you? Just let them know that you're still alive. And it kind of ends on her just saying, I'm embarrassed. Tanigaki and Koito are ambushed by some of Sophia's men, and this is when the tension starts to build. We've already seen the tensions kicking off with the first initial lie of Ogata to Kiro, and then Ogata pulling her away. Now we're back. We are back to the main two. This is where the episode is starting to really build, and the music this episode as well, building when it needs to, and it goes silent when it needs to. He then makes a different plea, a nice plea, where you need to leave everything to Sophia and Kiro. Don't shoulder the burden. Again, he asks her to tell him. And Asirpa is a smart kid. We do get to see her play quite smart this week as well. She even says, "Why are you talking to me? Why are you asking me any of this when Kiro isn't around?" And that scene is then interrupted by Kiro then calling out to them. That cuts nicely back into a little bit between the fights between the men and Tanigaki and Koito. Tanigaki ends up firing, the gunshot rings out. This then shatters the silence and everything starts to build. Ogata and Kiro both look up and Ogata realizes again it's the same gun. Where he ends up getting his binoculars out, but it's not Tanigaki that he sees. He sees Sugimoto. The level of tension, I am just going to keep phrasing the word tension, it is tense. Ogata now knows that Sugimoto is alive. Asirpa hasn't seen him. Immediately, we see Ogata jumping straight to it. He's pulling out the gun. He's going to finish the job. Sugimoto is thankfully saved by the fact that there is a storm. There is ice blowing in the way. Ogata hasn't got a clear shot. He can't see. The elements are now playing against him. It's a difficult scene because you guys know that Sugimoto is my favourite character. I cried at the end of season 2 with that cliffhanger, seeing him almost dead on the floor. And it is very, very difficult to see the fact that Ogata is going to shoot to kill. There is no going to be missing the second time round. And it's really difficult to watch it. But at the same time, I am just absolutely fascinated. I couldn't take my eyes away from the screen because I didn't know what was going to happen. This week, this entire episode, every minute we were chopping, turning. There was a twist after a twist. It was so well done. It kept you entertained on the edge of your seat. Sugimoto has realised that this is his only chance to get ahead because there is snow blocking him, and he breaks into a run, but the ice then starts to crack. Shirashi repeats the same line that Asirpa gave, that the sea currents are making the ice move. It's just so nice because it's a little moment. It's just a little nod to the impact that Asirpa has had on everybody around her, to Shirashi, to Asirpa, that he listens to her, the fact that he's now able to repeat that line back. It's just a little nod to see how far our characters have come. Kiro now decides to join the fray. You guys know me, oddly enough, out of Ogata and Kiro, I don't like Kiro. I really don't like Kiro, which probably is the reverse of what I think most of the viewers feel. Kiro leaves Sophia to go and investigate the gunshot, where we hear her calling out to Asirpa, where she tells Ogata it's time to go. What we see Ogata now doing, where he's telling half-truths and he's trying to gain a trust and start to have that disbelief, that distrust in Kiro. It's just this twist. This is the first moment where my jaw was on the floor. Kiro was signalling to somebody that day when Sugimoto and Wilk were murdered. And that is when we start to see him pulling Asirpa further and further away. I'm on the edge of my seat, I really am, guys, and I do apologise if this runs on for a little bit too long. We go back to Koito. It's the power of the simp when it comes to Koito. It really is that his love for Tsurumi. Tsurumi would be absolutely proud of Koito this episode. And I am a little bit worried for Koito. Koito shows the power of the simp and he manages to beat up the men. And it's a very brutal scene. But it's to say that the sword ended up being mightier than the gun. And it is a win for the two. Well, they start to realise that Tsukizumi is no longer with them. Cutting back, pulling Asirpa further and further away. And we can see that she cottoning on. Something isn't sitting right with her, and she is trying to pull against him. She's not willingly walking with him. She is putting up a little bit of a resistance as he tries to pull her away. She's struggling to comprehend that what she's just learned. She has finally learned the truth that Kiro was signaling to somebody. So she's like, why would he signal? What was he up to? And it's the very clever way that Ogata does this, and Ogata betrays Kiro. I knew this was going to happen at some point. I just couldn't figure out when. I've always struggled to understand why Ogata is with Kiro as willingly as he was, and the fact that they paired up at the end for season 2. We get all this in this episode. Those answers are finally given to us. Ogata reveals a half-truth. He waited for the confirmation that it was Wilk, and then he ordered both of them to be shot. Ogata is telling the truth, but he is omitting the fact that the person doing the shooting right at this point was himself. He is planting the seeds of doubt. He's trying to spark a reason for Asirpa to not trust Kiro, to not want to go back and tell Kiro anything. And he even says what happened between him and Wilk. So he's trying to plant the idea that something must have happened between him and Wilk, and he's the reason that Wilk is now dead. We get a really nice little visual, a nice little level of detail. Asirpa's nose is now going a little bit red because she's exposed to the elements. Absolutely love this little detail. The visuals in this episode, I really like this episode, guys, if you can tell. I would give this episode happily a 10 out of 10. I can't fault this episode. And then she ends up pulling him to a stop where she says, why did you hide this until this point? So he comes up with a nice little lie that he needed Kiro to jog Asirpa's memories, which we do know is the case that Kiro needed those memories to come back. He doesn't care what happens to the gold. Kiro is probably going to kill you once he gets the code from you. This is basically what he's going to do once he gets the code, but he's flipped it on its head. As soon as Ogata gets the code from Asirpa, he has no need for her anymore, and I don't think he's going to hesitate shooting, because we do see him turn the gun this episode. It is quite scary, because we essentially see the plan being set out, right, exactly what's going to happen to you, but again, I'm filling in the wrong details, I'm trying to confuse you, try and get you to believe me. He's trying a lot of different things, trying to get the information from her. He even says Kiro's going to come and kill us all. It's placing doubts in her mind, but the question is, does she believe it? But she is a very, very smart cookie. I love this next section. I've literally simply just put this. We are back to Koito reuniting with Tanigaki. And this moment, this is the moment, guys. This is probably where it went insane to just absolutely god-tier animation and composition. Koito is basically telling Tsukisama to leave Svetlana when we suddenly focus in a little bit too heavily on Tanigaki loading his gun. A bullet starts to fall down. It's coming down. It's slow motion. It's just this gorgeous slow motion where we can hear the sound getting distorted and it rings out. The entire scene, you know when you go underwater and your hearing goes very distorted? It feels like this. At the same time as he's literally pulling the gun back up, Kiro walks out to see Tanigaki, and Tanigaki turns around to see Kiro. The last time Tanigaki saw Kiro, and well, the result of what Kiro did, Inkimet was stabbed with his own blade, with the blade. She still had the blade in very carefully. She managed to keep the blade in, so we knew that she would be believed that Kiro had stabbed her. And we know that Tanigaki really has actually got feelings for Inkimet. I really do hope that Tanigaki, Bona, and Inkimet all get to be a little family unit at the end, because I really love those three, but I don't see a happy ending there, sadly. This is probably one of the most fiery reunions, but oh my god, the actual force, the actual anger, that moment when they both realise who the hell they are staring at. And it's that rage, that absolute rage, as Tanigaki does not hold back. His body just moves on his own, and he slams Kiro straight into that ice sheet because he is angry. The tension is absolutely beautiful, the way that this anime just builds and builds. I didn't think it was possible to outdo season 2's end. I am wrong. I am really hoping that these two episodes are just as hype as one another, but this at the moment is my favourite episode of the Golden Kamuy. We see again Ogata really begging Asirpa, but Asirpa is sweating, she is nervous, she's panicking, but so is Ogata. Ogata is starting to panic because he knows Sugimoto is catching up. He doesn't have time anymore. Asirpa is now also in danger if Sugimoto doesn't catch up quick enough. We go back, but sadly, my boy Tanigaki now taking a block of ice to the face, where Kiro just mercilessly, I think this is one of those reasons why I just don't like Kiro. He is just so brutal. He brutally bashes Tanigaki's face in with an ice block. At this moment here, I think this might have been the moment when I started being a bit teary. I thought Kiro killed Tanigaki. 100%. The anime does it on purpose because we see him plunging the ice block down. Then the music kind of vanishes, where Tanigaki sees Inkimet's face. So I was like, okay, that's it. He's dead. He's gone. I was crying because I was in silence. I had to pause for a second. But then the anime flips it on the head. And this moment is just, it's beautiful. It's also very striking because of what it actually symbolises. We see Kiro touching some blood on his hands, and I'm like, okay, that must be Tanigaki's blood in his hand. It's not. It is actually not. For a moment, though, I did think Tanigaki was dead. Kiro was stabbed in repayment for stabbing Inkimet with his own blade. He has returned his knife to him, and I think he stabbed him in the same side as well. And it cuts. Oh my God, that sequence. I was emotional at a sequence, and you guys can say, oh my God, she just cries at anything. That got me. Bear in mind, this has been building for 3 seasons. Oh my God, Sugimoto. I need to just do this. Fucking Sugimoto. Really? It breaks the tension. It does try nicely to try and break the tension from what we have just seen. The comedy duo is back. They are floating away on their little bit of ice. Sugimoto is trying to be a sail, and of course he learnt that from Asirpa. I love it. I love the comedy duo back. I think that's the only bit which was kind of keeping me from completely breaking down. The next section, we get just a few seconds of icy cold, building up the fact that this is cold. This is happening in a blizzard. This whole sequence is tension, but also it feels isolated. Asirpa can't see around her. The weather is making everybody feel cut off. It really does give this really imposing atmosphere on the whole sequence. Ogata starts to plead once more to Asirpa, where he starts to lower it. He pulls a few low, dirty moves here, where he starts to make a play for sympathy instead. And he mentions her one weak point. He mentions Sugimoto. He says, Sugimoto came to me for help. This is all lies. Asirpa doesn't know this. We, the audience, know this is just bollocks. All of this is just bollocks. The level he goes to, and it's horrible. It's really horrible to stomach and hear, where apparently he found Sugimoto and he was half conscious before he hadn't actually fully died. Ogata is starting to remind us, guys, that he's not a great person. He really isn't. But he is so well written. He is really amazingly written. Sugimoto apparently told him that he wanted some of the gold to go to his best friend's wife for some eye surgery. Sugimoto's dying wish. He's playing absolute dirty here because he knows how much Sugimoto means to Asirpa. But I feel like Ogata's story could have been a bit more believable. The story he kind of weaves, and to be fair, he's on the spot, he's panicking. It's quite a weak story because we do see Asirpa getting absolutely outraged. You lied to me, you told me he was dead when you found him. He just kind of tries to make up that he was trying to think of her feelings. I didn't want to tell you that his last words were about a widow and not you. He's trying to play, I'm on your side, I was trying to look out for you, I was an emotional attempt to get a response from her. Tell me for the sake of his last request. Because if you tell me, I will make that request happen. I'm on your side. I'm going to be doing this for Sugimoto. Don't you want this? This is what Sugimoto wants. Clever Asirpa. I didn't figure out what she was doing until the end, but this is clever. And Asirpa just goes, did you get a name? And I was like, okay, fair enough. Maybe she's just digging for details. At that point, I was like, is she trying to buy for time? He's trying to build on a lie. He is fabricating a truth that Asirpa will believe it. He's giving more and more details just so she can go, oh, he's got so much details, I can't fault it. Although apparently, if you are a liar, you will embellish your story. As soon as Asirpa gives him that name, she is dead. She will have no use to Ogata anymore. He has no reason to keep her around. Then she goes, did he say he wanted to eat anything? This little moment where Ogata goes, oh yeah, he wants monkfish stew. We work out that actually, no, she tricks him into basically tripping up. I've completely forgot the bit about the dried permisons. And that bit, I think, made me a little bit emotional because we get the flashback of them together and him saying that, I want to eat dried permisons. I got so emotional, guys. I also feel embarrassed that I'm telling loads of people on YouTube that I was crying during this episode. She then turns around and says, who are you talking about? You're not talking about Sugimoto. You're wrong. It's game over, Ogata. You have messed up. You can't pull the lie anymore. She pulls away from Ogata and goes tumbling to the floor quite cleverly, where she grabs her bow arrow, leaving no time, and she points them directly at him. It is tables flipped. I am so proud of Asirpa at this moment in time. It is a great power play. She doesn't trust a word he has to say, and Ogata is now out of time. He can't lie anymore, he can't beg her, he's now got to try a different method completely. I do love the fact that we see the distance between them, we've got the snow blowing between them, that distance feeling even more and more bigger. And that's when Ogata says, I need to ask you one thing. Why did you stop Sugimoto from killing me when we first met? And we know that she vowed not to kill anybody for the gold. I have to say, guys, I've praised this guy so much, and he really is probably my ultimate all-time favourite voice actor. Kenjiro Tsuda absolutely pulling off Ogata amazingly this episode. At this point, when he knows that he's kind of lost his chance to try and get it out of her, his voice then changes. And he does this so well. He starts to drop the tone a bit. So he talks a little bit lower. He drags out the syllables a bit more. And it turns really gravelly. It turns dark. It turns gravelly. He does this so much for all of the darker characters he plays. He plays so many good dark characters. It's going to be really weird seeing him play some really good characters next year. Absolutely cannot wait to see that. I do it so much, but I really do just have to say, it's not easy playing a bad character, an evil character, and he does it so well. And this new trick is guilt, where he said, did your father never teach you to kill somebody like me? He mentions this word again, purity. And this is the entire work, the backstory for Ogata coming forward, all coming full circle, because they start to remind us of the entire scenario with his brother, where he tried to get his brother to kill and not feel guilt, because he wants to prove that you can kill without feeling guilty. This sequence is just turned on its head. The brother is now Asirpa, and he says, kill me. It is such a clever turn. If you had a reason, you would not hesitate and you would not feel any guilt. I'm going to give you a reason. I had to pause because I knew exactly what was coming. I had to brace myself. And it's this visual, guys. I love this visual. The wind blows off his hat. That's it. The hats are off. The truth is out. There's no more covering up. There's no more denying it. There's no more just pandering around it. I killed your father. At that moment in time, I was for some reason thinking Darth Vader, I am your father. And I expected Asirpa to be like, no. That line, that's it. I killed your father. He is goading her into doing exactly what his brother would not do. He wants to prove that you are the same as me. And Asirpa and your brother, mate, are not you. Asirpa will not kill anybody. And that is when Ogata flips. He says, people like you should never exist. We get that visual, the anger, that sharpness in his eyes as he grabs his gun. Once again, we see that he's got the same result. He hasn't goaded somebody into killing and being like him. Sugimoto shouts out to Ogata, and it is such bad timing on Sugimoto's part, but again, he wouldn't have known. It is the shock of hearing Sugimoto's voice from the dead, essentially, that makes her release the arrow straight into Ogata's right eye. And we know how important the sniper's eyes to him. They are probably the most valuable part of him. The shock, the utter shock of shooting Ogata in the eye is just written all over her face. Her eyes are dead. Her face is just dead. We get the proper drawn style where it's all very detailed. He smiles at her as he hits the floor because he's got his result. He's got her, well, essentially kill him. I guess he thought he might die at this point. I didn't expect this to be Sugimoto's reunion with Ogata. Like I said, the one reunion I was really looking forward to was Sugimoto versus Ogata. Sugimoto would not hesitate to kill Ogata on sight. But no, it's the opposite. He jumps in to try saving Ogata. I'm not going to go into this detail. It's really, really gruesome where he removes his eye from the socket. He starts to bandage up, try and stop the bleeding and make sure that he's not going to die. He says, I will not let you make Asirpa a murderer. You will not die. You're going to live. Just that moment, I think at this point, I must have been also emotional because it's quite sad to see the presumable, I'm going to say, air quotes, end of Ogata at this. I think he might come back. So I think the way they've done it with Ogata, the wrap up here is he's probably going to come back at some point, which is great because I do think he is such a fascinating person, a character to watch. Although he could freeze to death, so he might die. Finally, guys, we have that moment. Sugimoto is protecting Asirpa. The ice splits in front of Asirpa. Fate is trying to pull her once again away from Sugimoto apart, but no, not this time. Not this time. Asirpa snaps right out of it, and we get that amazing leap of faith. And she jumps straight into a hug. I was the one who needed a hug at this point. I felt so bad. I wanted that hug. That hug it hit me right there in the feels after all that entire season of having those two apart and finally seeing them reunited. It was worth it. That hug was just worth it. And we just get the line, and there's no music now. It echoes. It's just reverb. I knew you were alive. I am immortal. It's just amazing. It just is. There are no words. Having no music it makes it more impactful. We see the sun shining through. This is it. The light is here. The two are together again. Everything is bright once more. Shiraishi holding Ryu back. He sees them together and he knows that the trio is back. My comedy babies are just back. I really love it. I really do love it. Having a quick moment before we go back to the next WTF sequence. Also, I do think it weird that Sugimoto goes, we need to follow Kiro, which is interesting. So Sugimoto does know that Kiro has stabbed Inkame and he should have a reason not to trust him, right? That's probably for next episode. I think dealing with Kiro is going to be coming next. Right, guys. And the comedy returns. We don't have this emotional moment too long. I can't be crying forever, guys. I have to now suddenly be pissing myself in laughter. The comedy returns. Asirpa gets her eye, ironically her eye, stuck to Sugimoto's metal button. What a reunion. This reunion where he's just like piss on her face and like, oh my god, no way. I know you're Golden Kamuy, but you've gone there. You've actually gone there. This is me in the middle of actually crying about what's just happened, and it's just like, can you piss? And it's like, I can piss. And it's just that heavenly choral music starts to play. There's beautiful shining glittery moments. I have no words except welcome to Golden Kamuy, guys. We get rainbow from Shiroshi's piss. That is just the madness returning, trying to lighten up the fact that this episode is heavy. And then we go back to see that Tanigaki is indeed alive, but very heavily wounded. Koito, I think next time Koito sees Tsurumi just needs to give him a hug, if he gets the chance to see him, because I'm worried about Koito. He asks him, who did this to you, where he tells him that it was Kiro who did this, and obviously he's covered in blood. And we can see the trail of blood leading away. Tanigaki is left with Svetlana, and Koito and Tsukisima start walking ahead. They see Tanigaki's gun on the floor. Oh, no, my Tsukisima, you finally raised in my ranks. Koito picks up the gun, pulling the trigger on the explosives. We know Kiro. If Kiro is around, there's always an explosive somewhere. That is his trademark. Headshot Ogata was his trademark. Explosive Kiro is definitely his trademark. We hear a massive explosion that every single party member hears. All our different characters react. We see Koito alive, but Tsukisima is bleeding from the ears. That makes me worried that his eardrums have burst. Does make me worried if he can actually hear. And we see Koito go charging off. Koito raising some ranks here, especially the way he goes out in this episode. We see him being stalked by Kiro. The seal once more breaks the silence. Also, I forget to mention there was a seal. The seal actually saves Koito's life, I think, because he could have been basically shot in the back. Where he is alerted to Kiro trying to load up his gun and fire at him. And he gets his sword out, and he forces him to shoot up in the air. Where Kiro then sadly gets the upper hand and stabs Koito through the arm. But we end on that line. How dare you hurt my men? Koito, you've really grown on me. You've really warmed up. I've really warmed up to you a little bit. So next week's episode is to live. I am speechless for the actual quality of this episode, and I do think it is the best episode of the full season. But it's sad because obviously not many people watch Golden Kamuy, and I have recently forced one of my friends and colleagues to get into it. I've basically gone, you watch this right now. So I think he's literally on episode 3 as I'm recording. And it was weird because he sent me a screenshot of him watching it, and it's Sugimoto with the first prisoner out in the forest. And it's so weird to see the start, and now here I am, sat at the most update episode, and just seeing where it all began. I love Golden Kamuy, guys. I really love Golden Kamuy, and it's taken me by storm. It really is. I don't think I've ever been this on the edge with an anime before. It's almost very similar to how I felt with the very early seasons of Game of Thrones. The twists, the turns, nobody is safe. This episode, nobody is safe. I got really worried for 3 different characters at one point. I thought Tanigaki was dead. I don't know if Ogata's gonna die, which I feel a little bit sad because it's the death of a very well-written character, and at the same time he's voiced by somebody I love. But it does free him up to go and play a good guy now in a different anime, so I'm quite happy with that. I am worried because obviously Tanigaki is my second baby. I love him to bits, so seeing him laying in a pool of blood wasn't happy. Like I also mentioned, I don't know what it is about Kiro. I just don't like Kiro. I really don't like Kiro. I had Ogata headshotting Sugimoto, still being able to talk about him in a nice way. But I just really don't like Kiro. And I'm hoping that next week's episode points exactly what it is that I just don't like about him. I am so nervous about next week's episode. I might actually have to go and rewatch this episode when I'm feeling less emotional. I've got so much of an edit job as well. Really loved this episode. Guys, I I love this episode. I don't know if you can tell, I really love it. Thank you again for tuning in. I know this is a bit of a weird way. I've kind of pushed through it as quickly as I can. I hope it doesn't drag too much, but thank you guys for tuning in once more. Thank you for also sitting with my reviews each week and putting up with me messing up, making mistakes. But you guys have sat with me and I thank you so much. Can't wait to join you guys for the end of season 3 next week on Monday, when we see the final episode of the Golden Kamuy, and we then have to wait 2 years before hopefully season 4 comes out. I can't wait, and I will probably do a nice big review episode completely separate after Golden Kamuy ends, and I'll have it come out maybe the week after. I feel like there's so much I want to talk about. I want to get my words properly, so I'm going to do a nice proper season review as a whole once this is done. So I hope you guys are staying safe. I hope as well, if you need a hug, have a socially distanced internet hug from me. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.